shifting gear into a more Austrian-focused perspective, we were supposed to be joined by the Secretary General of the Federal Ministry of Labor and Economy, Eva Landrichtinger. Unfortunately, she's unwell. We were informed last night. And luckily, we have a wonderful replacement. His name is Markus Raunig. He is the chairperson of Austrian startups and also a member of the Startup Council at the Ministry. And he will be having a nice fireside chat with Lisa Marie Fasel from Fund F, the managing partner. Please give them a warm welcome, everyone. They're going to tell us how they're going to 10x the startup ecosystem in Austria. I'm very curious what they're going to say. Thank you.
Nice. Hi, Marcus. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, despite the expectable shock of tomorrow morning.
I mean, this is something that we're definitely going to talk about in a second. I just wanted to briefly inform the audience that we sort of decided to do this last minute. So you're now going to listen to a conversation on stage that we would usually have in private. So it might be a bit cynical, it might be fun, it might be a bit sad. So I think it's going to be full of everything. So it's going to be authentic. But you already sort of addressed it. So we woke up this morning to the news that, surprisingly, Donald Trump is probably going to be the next president again. He is, despite the fact that the other person was probably more qualified, intelligent, better in every sense. But the good thing about Trump is, and I think also some Austrian investors openly shared this on social media platforms, it's actually great news for investors because everyone who checked the portfolio today, whether it's like crypto, whether it's like stocks, everything is going up. So for investors, it's perfect because we're going to make more money and we're going to pay less tax. Isn't that amazing, Marcus? Don't quote me anywhere, especially not on Sifted, because that's not my very personal opinion, obviously. But I think lots of investors, especially when you look at the tech giants in Silicon Valley, Mark Andreessen, etc., they are celebrating these big times. So what's your perspective on this?
Well, it is an opportunistic perspective on it. I think if you look at the tech giants and how they lead up with Trump, I believe from a perspective of human society, I think it's sad that someone who's so openly being an asshole and being morally corrupt is now the most powerful man in the world. And I think on that level, I'm sad because for our children, this is in some way what they see. To be successful, you need to be like him. So that's what I see negative in it. On the other hand, I mean, we're startup people. We always see opportunities in things. And what I do believe, this is a wake-up call for Europe. We need to stand on our own feet now. There is no more the big American brother who will watch over us. So both when it comes to technological sovereignty, but also when it comes to maybe the energy transition. This can be an opportunity for Europe where maybe we can take the lead now. And hopefully this is a wake-up call, not just for us in Austria, but generally in Europe.
So you're clearly the optimist. I'm usually the same. Now I'm going to be sort of the opposite. So I'm going to be a pessimist for once. So looking at Europe, looking at what has happened in the past years, looking at Austria, I mean, one could get frustrated, right? Because things are not really changing. And also looking at the recommendations, don't want to call it demands, that you published for politicians, which is the Austrian Startup Agenda, which probably almost everyone knows about, but probably doesn't know the content intensively. I mean, there are points that we've been discussing for the past 12 years. Isn't it frustrating to see this? And do you think that at one point actually something is going to change? Because I don't.
It's baby steps. And if you look at it on the detail level, then yes, there was some progress over the last few years. The red card got better. The FlexCo is a step in the right direction. The ESOP is more attractive from a tax perspective. So we've moved the needle a bit, but not enough to be competitive because others were much quicker and were much louder about it too. So I think, thankfully, we had some little successes, which makes it easier to be persistent and keep spreading our word. But at the same time, yes, to actually, and again, coming back to wake-up call, we as Europe need to wake up. And for that, we need to increase the speed and make some much bigger steps in the next legislation period.
As you're also part of the European Startup Association, you obviously have an overview of what's happening in literally every country in the European Union. And there are also now some initiatives, I hope most of you know, that are also coming up to actually do something that is kind of unifying our markets. So I'm wondering, how do you see like Austria sort of positioned in Europe, and what do you see, like, do you feel that Austria is specifically supportive of becoming more European and creating more of a unified market that is urgently needed? Because we all know, and that's not news at all, scaling a company in Europe is tough, markets are different, regulation is different, consumer behavior is different, blah, 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 so everything is difficult. Do you think that's changing anytime soon? And do you see that Austria is taking an active role in this, or we are like, if Germany is not doing it, we're also not supporting it, as always?
On a European level, I do believe there is some momentum currently. So the EU Inc. initiative really also now in the hearing of
Can you
of
explain that
several
a second?
combinations. The EU Inc. Is the idea that there needs to be a common legal setup within Europe. And this, so that you set up, there's a company form where you're a European company, not an Austrian or a German or a French company, but a European company. And based on that, to have that as the vessel, you can then do a lot of common regulation. So a lot of the problems that European startups have when it comes to scaling, that instead of in the US, it's 300 million people in one market that you can directly address. Here it's 27 markets with different regulations, different aspects that you need to cover both as an investor and as a startup. So there, to have unification is important. So on a European level with the Draghi report, with now the new commission, I believe there's momentum. On an Austrian level, that's not present yet. And I do believe it's helpful that we did the FlexCo, because now the gap between what the European setup could be and what the Austrian is a bit smaller. And actually there was an initiative already 10, 15 years ago where Germany and Austria were the ones blocking a European setup.
Really?
Because the notaries were pushing against it.
So, who in the room has good contacts to the notaries in Austria? Who can push this topic, because they are a pain in the ass for everyone? I mean, let's just call it what it is. I think I'm gonna make lots of friends today. Friends and enemies. Good news that we now have a bigger team at the fund who can cover if something is happening to me. Anyways, so lots of real talk. So now we talked a bit about the European perspective, but now narrowing it down on Austria, because obviously we can't change Europe, unfortunately. Maybe at one point we're gonna come politicians on a European level and then we're gonna change. No, okay, Marcus is not. But now we focus on Austria, I said. So you released the Austrian Startup Agenda. 42 points to make Austria, I don't want to say great again. It's tough. Make Austria better, more attractive, and as the title says, boost the startup ecosystem by 10x. The 10x is coming from me. Maybe your ambition is like even 20x or 30x, but what can we do? So what is in those 42 points? Can you give us an executive summary?
Well, I'll do my best. There's three main directions. First of all, we have several recommendations how Austria can become a country of bright minds. So everything in the direction of talent when it comes to the educational system to make it more entrepreneurial, for our universities to spin off more companies, for international talent to actually see Austria as the place to be, but also to have it easier to come here. We want to make Austria the country of bright minds. And everything in this direction is there to be copied, because that's generally the idea of the agenda. We talk to politicians and tell them, feel free to just use what's in there, because that's what worked last time with the FlexCo. It wasn't called FlexCo when we actually told them to copy it. It was called Austria Limited, which then actually had a copyright issue because there's a company in Tyrol called Austria Limited that then wrote to the ministry, you can't take that name. But yes, in the end, the idea is just copy it, and once it's in a government program, a lot gets easier. So first, country of bright minds. Second, country of bold investments, because yes, we need the capital markets, we need much more money going into innovation, into startups in Austria, and there's lots of stuff in there that we're trying to push already for quite a while. So the DACH fund, so the fund of funds, so that institutional investors do more in this direction. There's tax incentives for investors. We do have also from the perspective, how do we get banks and insurances to get more involved, so to get regulation on that level down. So lots of, again, small baby steps that together make a big difference. And then the third, how can we actually also become a country of modern bureaucracy, of a modern state? And there's, on the one hand, ideas that make it possible to become more European on that level, to have a unified common market, but on the other hand, also to position the topic of startups more prominently in the government.
So, to sum this up, it's basically about talent, it's about money, and it's about, you know, a framework where companies can thrive and where we can, you know, invest actively, etc. This seems like a presentation that we've been building with the Austrian Angel Investors Association like 8 years ago. So that's not new, apparently. Do you think that now with a new government coming in at one point in the next month, hopefully, that there is a better chance or a worse chance of actually getting those points across? Because as I said, it's not new, and all the people who are the decision makers, they know those points, and these are smart people, most of them, so they know what it takes to build a thriving ecosystem.
Right, it all depends on what kind of government we get in the end. I do believe that generally there's probably a better chance, simply because this wake-up call that is happening, and it's not just happening because of Trump, it's also happening because our economy is not working anymore. The business model of our economy, which was based on cheap Russian energy, that is not working anymore. So we need to become more innovative, we need to wake up. So I do believe this will enable us to hopefully be a bit more innovative on the political side too. I also hope maybe that this third party that could join a government also maybe can be the one pushing startup topics a bit more, because otherwise it's often they're telling each other they should push the startup topics. So I think maybe three parties in the government makes things much more complicated, but maybe it helps with our topics actually.
So you think that we're gonna not see the same situation as in Germany, which is not necessarily proactive and really pushing things forward, but you think that's actually a good thing that there might be three parties coming up. So it's gonna boost the ecosystem by 0.5x.
Yes, I'm an optimist. I do believe it's now or if it doesn't work, and that's also my hope. If it doesn't work, then anyway we have much bigger, much different problems. Then I think democracy is at stake, and yeah, I hope that all political decision makers see that as a threat and also work together. I also hope, and I truly believe that there should be technological shifts during the next government period. So hopefully AI will push the needle. Hopefully there might be other technological breakthroughs on the solar energy level. There's a lot of things happening. We are close to a tipping point here when it comes to the cost of energy. So I think if you get to the point where actually technology is also driving economic growth, which would be needed to make it easier to also reform our system, then I think is a good chance.
So your job as a member of the Startup Council is obviously to make the lives of politicians easier and make good decisions about the right things that are needed to boost the startup ecosystem. So to make their life as easy as possible. If you had one thing that you could pick out of the 42 points in the startup agenda that is creating the most impact, that is bringing the most significant boost to the Austrian ecosystem, what would it be?
I think short term, what's really graspable at the moment, and that's a European topic, is really this European common market. To have one common market in Europe where startups can immediately scale. If we get there, and there's a real opportunity at the moment, then I think this is a short-term game changer. At the same time, and now I'm cheating because it's another thing, long term, I do believe we need a cultural shift towards entrepreneurship in our society. And that's where we need to go into the educational system and completely change how we teach young people how to approach life. Every problem they encounter needs to be an opportunity, and they need to feel like pilots in their own life. Currently, most people feel like passengers in their own life. And as long as it's like that, it will be very difficult to compete.
I think we all know those people, unfortunately, and it's always shocking as an entrepreneurial spirit to see how passive some people are with their life. So I have two final questions before we get kicked off stage, and I hope that's okay. It's okay-ish, so you need to be short and brief. So as you're referring to, okay, we need to do something about this cultural shift. I heard that you're building a foundation that is focused on this. Can you briefly, like really 30 seconds, make a pitch for this foundation? Because I think, honestly, the public side will hopefully make our lives easier, but I think the private market is going to change most of those things and is going to have the most significant impact. And I think this foundation is probably the best solution that we have in Austria to boost entrepreneurial spirit, especially at young ages of kids. So very brief pitch.
That was a perfect pitch. I don't believe the state will solve our problems. We need to act as a civil society, as individuals, and we need that cultural change. And this foundation is exactly doing that. It takes private people's ideas, money, initiative, and tries to push this cultural change towards a more entrepreneurial society in Austria so that we can actually change our problems ourselves.
Please go and talk to Marcus and support the foundation in the best case scenario. Final question before we really get kicked off stage. So for those of you who don't know, Marcus is running a podcast, most successful tech podcast in Austria, Future Weekly. And his last question usually is when he's like interviewing guests, what is your number one moonshot prediction? So we're now going to turn things around and now we're going to ask you, Marcus, what is your moonshot prediction for next year? Please be as precise and as concrete as possible, but be crazy. We want to see ambition.
My moonshot is that next year, every child in Austria can run through a program that enables them to once try out starting their own ideas already during their youth. And my moonshot for the next year is that that's all over Europe.
So with this, we're going to close the session. I think the question that you can ask yourself is how you can actually support this vision. But as I said, talk to Marcus about this. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, as always, and now especially doing this on stage.
Thank you.